Hey folks, Alan Saunders, Mike Vukovcan, Pittsburgh Sports Now. We are doing this together separately here. Got a little Zoom chat going on, and if this works well, maybe we'll keep doing it. So I'll start off saying thank you for everyone that reached out with well wishes as I was sick there. I'm feeling a lot better, still a little bit hoarse, and I don't look great, so apologize for the audio-visual effects are still lingering, but my mind is sharp, and we're just going to talk some informal stuff here about Pitt football, basketball, maybe the Steelers. I don't know, whatever kind of comes up, and we'll try to keep this loose. And what do you got on your mind, Mike?
One thing I brought up, Alan, I threw it out there actually just an hour or so ago, just because I keep seeing these transfer or kids leaving early as freshmen. And I've always thought, I've thought this a little bit, and I know this was the Jamie Dixon formula of, I think this is the way he tried to recruit. And it's in my mind because some of these guys, Jeff Capel went after the last couple of years, in particular Kofi Cockburn from Illinois. He declared for the NBA draft. And I just wonder how important is it even worth the time for these programs to be going after? I can name a handful of guys that Coach Capel tried to go after the last couple of years, and they leave after a year. Is it better to go after those guys, or are you wasting your time? Is it better to get a few really good three-star guys, a la Tony Champagne, guys like that? I go back and forth on that what the best method is.
Yeah, I think that's actually something that, I mean, if you want to sort of rehash the end of Jamie's era here, I think that's something that I think he struggled with too, right? I think he felt that in the ACC, he was going to need higher level recruits than what he was able to have success with in the Big East. And I think that's why you saw sort of a change in the kind of player he was getting, guys that were more offensive, guys that weren't, sort of in that typical Pitt mold. But then you look at a team like Virginia, they kind of do what he did. To me, I always think there's always more than one way to do everything. I think you can have a lot of success with one-and-done players. I think Duke has done it. I think Kentucky's done it. And I think even teams that aren't that good can be lifted by a player who has one really meaningful, impactful season. But I also think the big struggle that Pitt has is going to be getting old. To me, that is the hardest thing to do in college basketball right now. And it's not just the NBA, it's the transfer portal. Guys don't want to sit there and wait their turn. They don't want to play through low minutes. They want to come in, they want to have an impact, then they want to get out. But if you look at the teams that are successful, some of them have really high-end talent, some of them develop talent, but most of the really good teams find a way to get old, to have teams full of juniors and seniors. And I think that's going to be the big thing that Pitt has to do. So could they have some one-and-dones in there? Sure, that would be okay. But they've got to find a way to get the bulk of the team to be those upperclassmen that have 2-3 years of experience.
And I think as fans, I think Capel kind of set the bar so high because of where he came from. And I think fans automatically expected him to be able to get those guys. And I think if you mentioned Duke and Kentucky, I think those guys, that's what their whole classes are filled with. And I think for a team like Pitt, to get a guy like that and to build up hopes and think you're going to build around him for a few years, and then he leaves after a year, I just think that does nothing for your pro. I think it sets you back. You don't maybe recruit that position for you. I don't know. I'm just changing my opinion on that. I'm not saying going after 2-star kids, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for Pitt not to be landing upper tier 4 or 5-star guys because, as you said, those guys are going to be here for a year. So you better be good right away. If not, then you're starting over from scratch, basically.
Yeah, I think you need to have some kind of foundation. If you don't have the kind of team around them that can, I mean, like if you took a 5-star big or a 5-star shooting guard and put them on Pitt's team last year, even if you knew they were only going to be there for 1 year, that would have made a heck of a difference. That would have made them a much better team that had been an NCAA tournament team for sure. that have been one of the better teams in the ACC. So, you know, I don't know. I think, to me, you got to get the kids you can get, and then it'll all work out from there. I think there's more than one way to be successful, and I don't think Pitt has to do either of them. Just think he's got to get the best kids he can, and then he's got to coach them up and get them to stick around. I think that's the really hard thing. I don't think there's any magic bullets there. He's an upfront, honest kind of coach. He's not going to sell these kids on something that they're not going to be able to achieve while they're here. But I still think it's hard to just keep guys together. I think, Trey McGowan's obviously a pretty good example of that. He's a guy that I think most Pitt fans thought was going to be one of the guys that helped lift this team up, and he leaves after 2 years. I don't have any ill will against Trey. I mean, if he thought it was a good decision for him, he wants to play the point. I mean, if you're that size and you're not a great outside shooter, if you have an NBA future, you probably need to be at least be able to be a part-time point guard. All that makes sense. I just think those are the reasons that makes it so difficult to keep a team together and stay old. And yeah, I don't think recruiting one and dones helps you get old. It might help you be a little better, though, while you're building whatever you're building.
I mentioned this last night on the Pitt Panther Talk podcast that I did, that you brought up a great comparison, and he made the news today, and that's Trey Murphy. He announced his Final Four. He's a guy that shoots from the you mentioned a guy that's a big that can hit from the outside, which would have been valuable. You watched your time in the house, you watched some tape on him. Tell the Pitt, you've had a lot of time. Tell the Pitt fans, you made an interesting comparison of who he reminds you of.
Yeah, he's a young Cam Johnson to me. I mean, it's a perfect fit. He's 6'8". He's a bit of a string bean. He's not going to out-muscle people to the basket. He's honestly not a dynamic player putting the ball on the floor, but he can shoot. He's not an incredible athlete, but if you're guarding a 2 or 3 spot from your 6'8", that still makes you generally a fairly effective defender. I think he's a perfect fit for Pitt from a what they need standpoint. The only thing to me that seems to be a bit of a fly in the ointment is his availability. If they don't pass the universal eligibility for transfers and he can't get a waiver, he'll have to sit out a year. And then, we're talking about the transfer portal. Who knows what the team looks like a year from now if they still need that, if they, maybe Xavier Johnson leaves for the NBA and then all of a sudden, we really need a point guard now. I don't know. So if he could play this fall, he would be absolutely perfect for them. He's still a really good player, even if he can't. And when you have that frame and that skill, you can always, even if he never gets any better, he'll be a very useful player for Pitt. But if he could add a little size and strength and kind of fill out a little bit, maybe he could be a really special player going forward.
Now we got a question here, and this might be in my wheelhouse because
all right.
Woods Justin is asking best athletes ever to come out of Aliquippa. And that question actually came up. I think WPIAL Insider threw out the question, best five.
Yeah, the best five
players you ever saw in person. And
I had a WPIAL player in my best five that I ever saw in person. Or I
actually had 2 Aliquippa players in my top 5.
Who were you? Who were your Aliquippa guys?
Well, see, you don't know this, Alan. I used to my young career when I was 16, 18 years old, I worked on radio, WMBA, broadcasting high school football games. And Aliquippa was always a team that we covered just because of how good they were. And I saw Ty Law play in person, unreal. He was one of my top 5. And the other one is a guy that, unless you're from here, you're probably not going to know this name. But Chico Williams, he was a running back from Aliquippa. He was he was as good as any running back I've ever seen here. His problem was academically, struggled academically, didn't get in there. I think he went to a community college in Kansas or someplace, never panned out there. He would have been, I didn't know back then what a 4- and 5-star player was. I wasn't into it but if those rankings were out back then, Chico Williams would have been a 4 or 5-star player. Those would have been the best 2 players and obviously you can name some other guy, Sean Gilbert, but my 2 best out of Quip were Law and Chico Williams.
Well, I did a little bit differently because I can't follow the rules. That's just not me. So I picked one from each sport. So I picked Terrell Pryor as the best football player I saw. I picked Neil Walker as the best baseball player I saw. Who else did I picked Swin Cash as the best girls basketball player, and Spencer Lee, who's now at Iowa, as the best wrestler. But my best basketball player, it said WPIAL, so I would have said DeJuan Blair otherwise. But Herb Pope
Quip.
was obviously it's talking about another guy, tragic story, with the way what could have been his career panned out. But he was an incredible high school player, and really was dominant, I thought.
Yeah, he should have been an NBA player. He
really had.
He committed to Pitt when he was a sophomore, right? Am I?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right.
And then he got in, a lot of off the field stuff with him, and never allowed him to. I think he hooked on for a bit with Seton Hall, but he never.
But, yeah.
Never did what he was supposed to do. We have another question here from Jason. What's it, Alan? Your thoughts on the virtual draft?
My thoughts on the virtual draft. Well, I was kind of making fun of it on Twitter the other day and said, like, can't wait to find out which NFL GMs can't figure out how to make the technology work, or aren't paying attention, or who goes on their video call with not wearing a shirt or something. I don't know. I'm just looking forward to
Andy Reid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I want Andy Reid to show up on the video chat wearing just suspenders or something. I don't know. I think it could be fun. I hope they have fun with it. The NFL's so stodgy. Everybody's so, serious. And obviously it's a multi-billion-dollar industry with, a lot of people's jobs on the line in the draft. But I hope they find a way to have some fun with it. Why not? Why not make the best of something? As far as actually drafting, it'll be fine. Who cares? It doesn't matter. They don't need to be there. Kids don't need to be there. The baseball draft has been this way for 100 years, and it's never bothered anybody. I don't think it'll be an issue.
I like the proposal. I guess the story came out today. We had on Steelers Now, and a lot of other sites had it as well, where Kevin Colbert's 1-year deal about going to 10 rounds.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because the undrafted free agent market is the dirtiest part of pro football. And without there being able to be people in offices and all this contact, it's going to be real dirty this year. I think it's a great idea. I don't know if it's going to catch on or not, but somebody is going to end up with, 10 great undrafted free agents or something. I can just guarantee there's going to be shenanigans in the undrafted free agent market if they do things the way they usually do.
And I was thinking, I think I brought this up to you or somebody else on the phone. I was wondering what players, guys that are borderline 6-7 round picks, and also free agents, are going to be affected the most by not having pro day and being able to work out for the teams, because this is definitely going to hurt them. Some of those guys, like we saw Dane Jackson, I think him being able to do what he did at the combine guaranteed him of falling somewhere in there. But a guy like Maurice French, that's the guy that comes to mind to me, that, he did some stuff here, but how's he going to test out? How's he going to run and, in front of the other people? He's a guy that, might go undrafted now just because of, teams didn't get a chance to see him for themselves.
Yeah, I forget exactly how many guys go to the combine every year, but every year, there'll be 30 or 40 guys that went to the combine that don't end up getting drafted, and vice versa. There'll be, a bunch of guys that didn't go to the combine that do end up get drafted, sometimes pretty highly. And I think it's going to hurt those guys. I think you're going to see this year where if you didn't go to the combine and you didn't have an early pro day, it's going to be hard to overcome. But, the other thing is, most of the time, if you're a low round pick or you're an undrafted free agent, you're thinking you're going to come in and you're going to prove yourself in minicamp, and you're going to prove yourself at OTAs. And really, I mean, if you think about some of the guys the Steelers have taken, in that undrafted free agent role that have gone on to have success. People were writing about them and talking about them in the first week of May as guys that could make the roster. Without an off season, if we don't have football until training camp or maybe even later, how's an undrafted free agent ever going to make the team anyway?
Yeah.
So like, to me, I don't know. It's going to be very difficult. I think one of the things you're going to see is a lot of the guys that went to the XFL are going to get a bigger chance than they otherwise would have because they have film of them playing pro football. And I think that's an advantage. I think you look at a guy like Kenny Robinson, WPIAL and West Virginia guy who, excuse me, he decided to go to the XFL instead of his last year of college to prepare for the draft. I think it might end up working out really well for him just because he's got recent film and I think teams can bank on that. Steelers signed a bunch of those guys already. I like a couple of them. Dwayne Hendricks, obviously, former Pitt guy. But I expect that to be where if you're looking at guys that can maybe make the roster and make some noise, might be those guys instead of the undrafted free agents.
All right, one other I was thinking about, this is my wheelhouse since I focus a lot of my stuff on recruiting, is I'm waiting for this to come out, but what are your thoughts on the one signing day for college for recruiting, with the chance that these kids not going around being able to get involved in summer camps where they pick up scholarships, where they go make official visits. If all this stuff gets pushed back, they're not going to get a chance to make their visits. So I really don't know how they would be able to, unless things miraculously start picking up here real soon. I don't think the NCAA has any choice but to make it a one signing day in February.
One signing day, and it honestly might be farther back than February. Kids, if you think about the way it works, if you're a recruit, your junior year academically is the most important year for you to get NCAA eligible as a freshman. And now these juniors that would talk about being signed in February, the class of 2021 for football, they're getting the end of their junior season is like, who knows? Like, how are they getting all their classes done? Are they going to get good grades? Homeschooling? Nobody really knows. You take a kid who may have been a B or C student going to school every day, and then you put them at home and stick them in front of a computer. What's going to happen to their GPA? No one has taken college boards in 3 weeks. Nobody knows any idea when that's going to happen again, and those are required for NCAA eligibility. Talked to Heather Like about that on her chat last week. That's a huge question mark. If we don't get SATs and ACTs for these kids, they can't be eligible.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think these guys signing in December seems iffy. Even putting them all in February seems a bit iffy to me. I don't know. This may have to be a year where the recruiting process, and look, we may be playing football in February because we might be starting the season on time. So like, I don't know. There's anytime I get into a conversation about like, well, when's this going to happen? I don't know, because we don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah. And I'm, as far as the recruiting goes, I guess it's an advantage for Pitt. Yeah, I noticed some of these kids are starting to make decisions now, and I don't know if they just want to get it out of the way and make sure they're in with a school or not. But I guess some of the kids that have already visited Pitt, they're going to have an advantage as far as kids that came in, December, January, and in February. But one thing that I see is some of these new territories, and I wonder how this is going to work out, that Pitt is trying to get into, like Texas. And I talked to a lot of these kids, Georgia. They want to come up for visits, and they appear to be, quote, hot on Pitt, but they've never been here. And the Pitt and other colleges now are doing the virtual tour, or I don't know how effective that's going to be. And they've placed such an emphasis on getting into these new states, and it's almost a waste of time for this year, because I don't know how they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a year where you see a lot of kids committing to schools close to home. I mean, I
Yeah,
just think that's going to be the way it's going to go, and maybe that hurts Pitt in Georgia and Texas, but maybe it helps them here. So it will hurt them in Georgia and Texas, though, especially because they don't have the kind of long-term relationships with those coaches and schools that they do in a place like, say, South Florida. Charlie Partridge has been recruiting Florida for 15 years. Like, he knows every kid, he knows every coach. They're still going to be able to get kids out of Florida. Are they going to be able to get kids out of Georgia and Texas? I don't know. I mean, they did okay in Georgia last year. We'll see. But I think it's going to be a year where you see a lot of kids. I mean, just on the basketball side, Jadon Michael, who was a kid that Pitt was talking to, 3-4 star kid, ends up going to Elon. I mean, like, that doesn't happen if
right.
there's no pandemic, and that never happens. So maybe it's a good year for Pitt with some local kids or kids in Ohio or central Pennsylvania that aren't that far down the road. It's really going to hurt the schools that really rely on those far away pipelines. Take a look at a school like West Virginia, just got a commitment from a kid in Alabama today. That they have to do that. They don't have 20 Division I players in the state of West Virginia. They have to go get them. So it's really, I mean, on the one hand, it might hurt Pitt, but they're also not in the world's worst situation if kids close to home want to commit too, because they do have something of a home base.
Well, the one position I was looking at, I wrote about because last week they continued. Realistically, they have a chance at 5 kids at quarterback. And the interesting part that I saw was 3 of the realistic kids are from Texas. The other one's from California. So that's just not getting. The other kid's from Virginia. He's never visited Pitt either. So it was just weird. The one kid, what do we have here? Nate Yarnell from Austin, Texas. Hampton Fry from Fort Worth, and Chiron Drones is a guy that I like from Houston. He wants to get up here, but it's not going to be happening anytime soon. But it's just weird that the one year because they need to get a quarterback this year too. They took none last year.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's people talking like, oh, what's Pitt, the quarterback for? I'm like, no, they absolutely need a 21 quarterback. They did not get a freshman in 20. You want to have one in every class, so they're just now getting back to having 4 scholarship quarterbacks as it is. They got to take one, and especially because you're setting yourself up. This is going to be Kenny Pickett's last season, 2021. You're going to have some kind of open competition for quarterback. Guess what happens when you have an open competition for quarterback? The losers leave. So you gotta have another quarterback in this class for sure. You can end up being your backup next year.
Yeah. Big story today. I'll bring it up. Is I just find his recruiting to be fascinating. Is Donovan McMillan from Pitt Township? It's just unreal. The offers this kid is getting. And at first, I'll be honest, when he first started out, even after he got a few offers, 10, 20 offers, I still said, people message me, where do you think he's going to go? And I said, if you had to put a gun to my head, he's going to stay home. He's going to go to Pitt. He's a big family guy, very close with his mother, with his younger brothers, want to stay home. But this is going to be tough. Pat Narduzzi wants to keep the best players, and he wants a recruiting battle. He got one with his kid. He got the offer today from LSU. I still give Pitt a chance, but the more he keeps getting these offers, now that LSU offers, I wouldn't be shocked to see very soon Alabama come up, Georgia come up. Ohio. I'm kind of shocked by it that Ohio State hasn't got in already, but I guess they can figure they can get in on a kid anytime they offer. So it's not that big of a deal for them. But his recruitment is just – have you seen anything like that as far as a kid that in end of November he had one Power 5 offer, and then, 3 months, he has 40-some offers.
It's funny, and I got to give mad credit to Steve Brenner, who's our high school football writer. Steve and I do a football show every Friday during high school football season. And he'd been building up Peters Township and Donovan McMillan since August with me. And I was like, yeah, okay. He saw them early. They were good, whatever. And I got to cover him in the WPIAL championship game. Ended up losing the Gateway in a rainstorm. But that's a good team, and he's a great player. And to me, it's just so easy to get cynical about recruiting. But how does a guy go from one offer to 40 without playing a game in between?
That's
Like,
my
wow.
point. Yeah.
What were the coaches doing before? I think it's just so much copycat, so much one guy offers than the next guy offers. It's tough, and not that many. I mean, it's not a place where a lot of guys have come from. If he was Donovan McMillan from Aliquippa or from Central Catholic, probably would have had 15 offers before his junior year. So I think that's part of it too. But man, I do think there's a lot of copycat recruiters out there, and he's a guy who, when you put the tape on, he looks impressive. So the people that saw him early and said, "Hey, this kid's good," they kind of opened the door for him.
Are you a half empty, half full guy with Pitt as far as him with Pitt?
I don't know if I have much of a read there.
What's that?
I don't know if I have much of a read there. To me, listen, trying to predict what 17-year-old boys do is not a good business to be in. I don't know. I don't know him hardly at all. Just some DMs here and there. I think I interviewed him one time. But he seems like a good kid. Seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. I don't know. I haven't got a good sense of what's really important to him. And I think that's when you're trying to unlock these things, I think that's what you really have to try to figure out is what's really important to him. Because I think so many people get wrapped up in a bunch of shit that may not necessarily matter to people. Like, okay, kid goes to Elon. Well, apparently staying home was important to him. So then that was a good decision. Like, it doesn't matter that Elon's a worse basketball team. Is it going to matter in 10 years if you played for Elon or Wichita? Like, I don't know. It just depends on what's important to people. And I think people that are fans lose sight of that very quickly, that what's important to people is very different from person to person. And what a successful college career looks very different from person to person too. Maybe a person really wants to win championships. Maybe a person just really wants to start and they don't ever want to set the bench. Maybe a person just really wants to go to a specific school for a specific academic reason, or because it's close, or because their friends go there. Lots of reasons for kids to do things. And I don't know. He could. Here's the thing. If he goes to Pitt, that's a big, big, big recruiting win for Pitt. Let's just say that.
I would say that if he would go to Pitt, I would. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head here, real quick, but probably that would probably be Pat Narduzzi's biggest recruiting win. I can't think of.
I mean, he had DeMar, I guess, was he beat some pretty good schools for him.
Yeah, DeMar. Yeah,
was involved.
This kid though was. Come on, I'm telling you, Ohio State. It's just gonna. I don't know. We'll see. It should be interesting, but I don't think that's has. I think this is going to last a long time. And
well, how do you? I mean, that's like. How do you sort through 40 some offers? I don't know.
Not being able to visit too, and that was
not even able to go.
He wanted to go see. He's never experienced Oklahoma before. He's never been on their campus. He's never been to Notre Dame on their campus. You see it in video, but he's been to Pitt a million times. He's been to Penn State a million times. He doesn't need to see those places.
And how many times have we written a story where the kid, a commitment story where, I just went on the campus visit and I just fell in love with the place. It was the people and the place. It was just awesome, and I fell in love with it, and I knew right then and there that's what I wanted to go. I mean, that's like half of the stories we write when a kid commits. That's how it goes. So until he takes some visits, it's really very speculative.
Last thing here, Alan, is right now you'd be covering baseball. You would be. I know you're probably missing it a bit, being at the ballpark.
Oh yeah.
And there's all these scenarios being brought now with the NFL or NHL, MLB, playing in Arizona, playing in North Dakota, or wherever for the NHL. Realistically, what do you? If you had a guess, what's the first major or even college sports league. I think you and I talked about this on the phone a month ago, whatever. Time.
Yeah, I've been in my house for a month.
Yeah, I don't even know what time
I
is.
had to like start scratching the days on the wall. Like,
right. What do you think? Realistically, what do you think the first thing we're going to see start up here is?
I think we'll see the NBA finish their season because it requires the fewest number of people to operate. And I think that makes it the easiest logistically to work through. Plus, they already had a dozen players that have already had it. So they have sort of a good head start on what the symptoms look like, how to test and monitor players. They've done it. They've been doing it. What we really need is a lot of testing. And really what we really need to do a lot of things is just a lot of testing. I mean, I don't think, you look at South Korea's playing baseball right now. Now, not without fans, but they're playing baseball because they have the ability to test and test and test. So I guess the hope here is that if this lockdown that we're in can reduce the transmission to a level where once we open things again, they can use contact tracing and epidemiology to root out the cases instead of letting it just spread and getting it from who knows where, then maybe things can get back to normal. I don't know. I think it's going to take a lot. And honestly, it's hard to seem like the sports matter that much, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of money at stake for these people. For people like you and me, there's a little bit of money at stake, but it's sure important to us. But it's also, not a priority for anybody in the big picture. Like, we need lots of testing to do lots of things, not just play basketball. But to me, I think that's the sport that, I mean, how many people do you need to put on a basketball game? Like 100, maybe? I don't know, not even. Like, there's 100 football guys on one college football team. Like, that's a huge difference. And also the other thing is, I think the leadership to me of the NBA is far superior to all of the other professional sports leagues. And so to me, if somebody's going to figure it out, a way to do it that's safe and be able to still make their money, it'll be them.
All right, my man, be safe.
Wait, we got one last question. Did Carol Bascom kill her husband? Absolutely, she killed her husband.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? The 5 seconds after I saw it, actually, when I saw her wear the lion pants or her house or whatever, I knew she's as guilty. I tell you, when you get me fired up, we'll start talking about that show right there. She, I know Joe Exotic, he had his faults, but that lady's still walking free. It's a crime.
Yeah, it's
that's just unbelievable. That Carol.
That's a great question. Thank you. Red flag.
That was one of our my wife and I. That was one of our series that we watched. We're trying to figure out another one now. We're done with that. I've been getting into the house while I'm gone. What other?
Did you watch McMillions?
Yes, yeah, that was the first one.
That was a good one. I was a big fan of that one.
Yeah, so now we're getting into the shows that she likes. What do we do? Housewives of New York.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
New Jersey.
That's a leave the room kind of option for me. I'm not around for that.
No, I kind of have to. So, but that's actually, I'm not gonna lie, I do kind of like it a little bit. But after I wait for a bit, it's not that bad. But speaking of that, I think I got to get upstairs and check out some what's on the TV.
All right, man. Sounds good. We'll do this again. Thanks, everybody, for checking this out. And, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel here. You'll get notifications for all our videos. And, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Steelers Now, where to find our stuff. So thanks, everybody. Let's do it again. That was fun.
Yep.